Hey, welcome to another special episode of South Center's Chat. I'm Patrick Dangle, and today we have two great guests from Nebraska who is going to be talking about their experiences working in a silage farm. So stay tuned. Hey, welcome to another episode of South Center's Chat. This is a special format. It's my great pleasure to have two individuals from Nebraska, Ohio. Can you believe that? From the state of Nebraska, who have had a lot of experience in various different agricultural positions. And most recently, they enjoyed 3 to 4 weeks working in a silage farm. And I want to welcome Mary and I want to welcome Dave. Ladies first, Mary, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in central Nebraska in a small town of about 1,400 called Burwell, Nebraska, in the very center of the state if you're looking at a map. And I grew up in a small family with one sister, and we were not living on a farm, but my dad was a rural mailman for many years, and we were out in the country a lot, and we were very involved in 4-H and in programs at school regarding ag and home ec and things like that. So,
and it's my understanding that you have how many grandchildren?
We have 10 grandchildren.
Yeah, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you would like to name your grandchildren or children?
Well, I suppose I could name my children first.
Okay. All right.
The children, Angela, Philip, Michael, Tim, and Monica.
Ah, very good. And how about your grandchildren?
Okay. Grandchildren, I have to say a shout out to these wonderful, awesome grandchildren. Right?
Okay.
Living in Ohio are Alexander, Zachary, and Sophia. We just had a chance to see them the last week and we had a great time. Hi, guys. And living in Omaha are Eli and Zoe, Isaiah, Grace, Malachi, and Mercy. Wow. Hi there. We love you.
Wow. That is fantastic. And, of course, you're married to Dave, 44 years. Fantastic.
And holding. No, and moving on.
And moving on. So Dave, care to share some things about yourself?
Well, Patrick, you and I go back quite a ways to our college days. In fact, I lived here in central Ohio for many years until I got married, met my wife, and moved out to Nebraska, and have been living there since 1975 when we got married. And I've worked mostly in auto parts, but I've had occasion over the years to spend some time on farms, and I was hired as a hand on a farm. I worked hogs. I worked out in the field raking and baling hay and doing various jobs like that around the farm. So I've picked up some knowledge about farming through that way, though I was not raised on a farm. But it's been interesting to learn about all of these farm activities and to be associated with life on a farm. So this adventure in doing the silage on a farm just seemed to be kind of a natural thing for me. I was not hesitant to jump in a tractor or a truck or whatever it is, to help out.
I'll tell you what, some information that they brought to me. I've never been to the state of Nebraska, but here are a couple interesting statistics that I found. That 1 out of every 4 jobs is related to agriculture in Nebraska. And something that I was really amazed at is 47,400 farms with an average of 958 acres in Nebraska. And that you are the second largest in ethanol. Mm-hmm. And so that's a lot of corn.
A lot of corn.
And it's just amazing when you look at some of the statistics that they have. And that you were mentioning something about the $21.5 billion. Here are some of the exports.
Right.
And that's cattle, calving, corn, soybean, hay production, dairy, wheat. Gee, is there anything in agriculture you don't do?
Probably not.
So it's just amazing, all the different things. And so the two of you, by the way, I wanted to point out, Mary is had experience working in the extension program in Nebraska, and that your children grew up in 4-H.
4-H, awesome program. I was involved in 4-H. My mom was a leader for 25 years. I was a leader for a number of years. Our kids were involved for 10 years. Our grandchildren are now involved. We're working with them. So 4-H has just opened up our world to just being leaders, to knowing about how to do things, and to having preparation for the world, for your career. Our daughter attributes 4-H to her career, even now. So.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know, Dave, you've had a love of outdoors. You are a scoutmaster, and your children were.
Yeah, all of my boys went through the scouting program, and I was a parent for the Boy Scout program, and I was actually a Cub Master in the Cub Scout program when they were younger. So, yeah, we did a lot of camp outs and a lot of activities that the Boy Scouts used to.
And two of your sons are Eagle Scouts.
Yes,
Yeah,
I have two sons who made it all the way to Eagle.
And a Life
Fantastic.
Scout, which is right below. So all three of them were active.
Wow, that's fantastic. So living outdoors or being a part of the outdoors sort of comes natural to both of you, correct?
Oh yes, our family has been on campouts just by ourselves, just for a fun activity over a weekend too as well. So.
And so silage-wise, I'll be quite frank with you. I'm not that familiar with the term silage. So, what is silage?
Well, go ahead, honey.
Yeah, silage is cattle feed, basically, or feed that is fermented. There are many things you can cut as silage. There's mostly corn is done for silage, but you can do haylage, you can do earlage, just all kinds of products. We cut some millet the other day, last week when we were out, or a couple weeks ago. You can make that into silage. Anything that ferments and is covered in an airtight place and ferments is used for feed.
My understanding of the word ferment is usually involved with alcohol. So is there another term for it? You know, we don't want to get those cows tipsy.
Well, it basically breaks down the fiber and the elements in the corn or the wheat or the millet or whatever they're. So it's easier to digest for the cattle. That's the main part.
I see. And so since Nebraska has so many different farms, etc., there's a certain period of time that it becomes important to create these silage piles.
Well, as corn grows, of course, it soaks up moisture from the ground, and in order to aid the fermentation progress, the corn has to be just a certain percentage of moisture, so they have to wait until it dries down. So there's only a certain window of time that they can harvest this corn and grind it up for feed. And you have maybe 6 or 8 weeks, depending on the various varieties of the corn, in order which that can be done.
Let's take a look at some of the pictures.
This is one of the trucks.
Now, that's me in the truck, and that little blue symbol on the side of it there that truck was used for another purpose earlier, and they repurposed it to put a big box on the back to haul silage. And so the owner of that truck, if affectionately, calls it the Blue Dot. So people recognize that as the Blue Dot truck and call it that.
It's a classy truck, so.
Now, we don't normally get dressed up to go chopping silage out in the field, but here I just happened to be dressed up as we were driving by, so somebody wanted a picture of a driver all dressed up to go to work.
Especially to drive that classy blue dot.
And this is kind of what it looks like as you drive into a field that's already been harvested. As you go across to the corn that has not yet been harvested, you kick up a lot of dust, and you got to go down the rows, and it's kind of a rough ride sometimes.
Do the pastures ever get wet? Do you cut them during when it gets wet?
Well, you have to capture the corn when it is at a certain moisture level. So sometimes it has just rained, and so the fields are muddy, and that's a little more difficult, but you have to go rain or shine.
Yeah.
So here they're cutting through a path.
You have to open a path in the middle of the field in order to get through the field, and so you can use a couple of different choppers to go through the field at the same time, because you have hopefully more than one chopper and several trucks that you can use at the same time. So you open the field first, through the middle, or wherever the chopper drivers think it's good, and then you drive along.
And when you say choppers, you're talking about, how fine does it cut?
Yeah, here's one of the machines at work. I mean, it has to take all of that corn stalk. They pick it off about 6 or 8 inches from the ground, and it goes through a conveyor belt, in through the machine, and out through a chute there to get it loaded onto a truck.
That's how it looks when you're driving by the chopper from a truck. Now, this is done very carefully, I might add, out the window, because I wanted to give an idea of how it looks when you're riding by the chopper. That's the actual chopper.
And so when it cuts it into like fine grain?
Not so fine, just small pieces.
It's like what you might picture a garden salad on your table.
Oh,
Right.
okay. All right.
Yep. We had never driven big trucks like this, but we like to drive things, and this is how it looks coming through the field. Here you have a truck behind the actual truck that's collecting the silage, and then we're behind that, one of us, I believe that's me, ready. So you get in line, and as soon as the truck is full, you drive in place, and the chopper fills your truck up.
Huh.
So you keep it rolling if you can. So.
And I noticed that you leave little stubs on the ground, and those are the corn shoots, etc. So I'm assuming that a plow later on will turn that soil over and keep the stubs in there. Is that correct?
Yeah, they disc them out and turn them back into the ground, because certain nutrients are left there for the next crop. And after a truck is full, then we take it to an appropriate spot. Usually it's a prepared spot. Sometimes they put a plastic lining on the ground, or else they cement an area to pile up the silage. That's to prevent dirt from getting into the forage as they pile it up, and then a tractor comes along and pushes it up into a pile.
Yeah, you have to weigh the silage. Every time you take a load in, you go through a big scale and you weigh the silage. And when you're working for cutting silage for a big company, say, you have lots of different fields you have to go to. And some of these fields are owned by different farmers. So you have to weigh each truck so you know how much silage you've cut for each farmer. So then you pay him for that silage, or they pay for that silage.
I noticed that there's a tractor on top of the mound. What does the tractor do?
Yeah. See here, the truck is dumping a load of silage there on the ground, and then the tractors come along and push that up into a pile.
I see.
And usually, if you have an extra tractor, he can just drive around on top of the pile and pack it down really firm, and so it ferments well and doesn't get a lot of extra moisture in there.
And you had mentioned something about there was so much silage that it was the size of a football, or was it more than a football?
Well, the pile that we created this past year was as long as a football field, if you can imagine that, and maybe even a little wider, and it was piled up to 30 or 40 feet.
Wow.
And that came to
pile.
about 58,000, 55,000 ton.
Huh. And so I'm assuming as months go by, how long does it need to ferment?
Well, they like to let it sit 6 to 8 months at least. So this silage that we just chopped this year will be used next year when it's ready, and they're just about done using the pile that was made last year.
I see.
So they mix that with some other nutrients, some proteins, and various other commodities to make it nutritious for the cows, so that they can produce their milk or to put on their beef or whatever it is the purpose for the feed.
So what are we looking here?
Okay, that's out in the field. Then you see some of those rows have been chopped already, and we just move through methodically across the field and until it's all been harvested.
And this is a chopper?
That's a chopper, and sometimes they break down, and so they're working on this one to get it back into working order. And it's kind of amazing that these guys know how all these things work, and they
They're
can.
huge machines. They just.
And
Well,
really
isn't it true that in the farming operations, not only do you have to be a farmer, but you also have to be a mechanic, and you have to be understand about the weather and a variety of different things.
That is true, yeah. It's amazing to me. I mean, these machines are huge. Not only are the trucks big, I mean, a truck that I drove held 16 ton of silage for one load. And you have to know how to work on all those machines and the choppers. And they do it right out in the field. They have a maintenance truck that they bring, and they have to many times go get parts and go send for parts, and people drive parts out. So we cut probably, we worked for about 3 weeks on this dairy that we were cutting for, and we cut a total of maybe, I don't know, 2,000 acres.
Wow. And what are we looking at here?
Oh, this is a pivot. A picture in the distance that I took of a pivot, and it's hard to see it up close, but
It's a sprinkler system.
sprinkler, yes. They go all around the field, and they make big grooves, so you have to drive over the pivot. And sometimes they get wet, and it's a real deep rut, and you have to drive over that. And sometimes you can even bump your head on the ceiling if you don't have a seatbelt on, because it's real bumpy in the field. That's a field we've worked on, and a couple of older buildings that Dave knew had some historical significance in Nebraska, but and that's
Interesting.
the pile.
And this looks like a storm is coming.
Well, we were thinking there was rain coming that day, so we had to finish it up a certain time. So they always watch the weather. They're very careful about that, and about what's coming the next few days and stuff. So
I know that Nebraska, now this
gotta have
is
a
an
Big
interesting-
Mac when you drive a Mac. It was good.
It was a Mack truck that we drove.
It looks like the day is either starting or the day is ending.
I think that's starting. It's absolutely, that's hard to tell. Absolutely beautiful. Gorgeous sunrises, sunsets, open country. You know, there you can see the sun rising over the field. And there's the actual silage. Dairy farm is where we picked mainly this year. So
And on how many head of cattle for the dairies?
I think they have about 3,500.
3,500 cows.
That's the
cow.
number I remember hearing. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but
Well,
Just kind of as a side benefit, they take all that milk, and of course they make dairy products with it, and one of their products is ice cream. So on a hot day, sometimes the people would give the truck drivers, as they came in to weigh their silage, they would hand out an ice cream sandwich or an ice cream bar or something, just as a way of saying thank you, you know.
Every
And I
day.
didn't mind that at all.
every day, 4 o'clock, it's ice cream. It was great. Oh, this is a good picture. This shows the whole, this is the football
Wow.
size, the football field.
That
the
you're
size.
building the
Yep.
silage
This is
mound.
the final one. And you can see on the one end are tires. And when the silage pile is all done, you put 2 levels of plastic, 2 layers of plastic are stretched over this huge pile. Takes a lot of guys to stretch that over. Then they put tires. Those are all old tires.
Oh, okay.
And they don't like it to any moisture to get in this silage. So they cover it totally with so it's airtight for the next year. Well, let's see. Oh, that's
And-
just a lot of birds in the open country. That's one of the big trucks.
Huh.
Look at that truck.
And I'm assuming that birds love you when you're doing silage.
Whenever we spill a little bit, they come down to get it.
So they're constantly watching. Oh, that's interesting. Any special kind of birds or just birds?
Those are starlings, but I think that there's a lot of. There were some chickens in one of the nearby farms that kept running across the road trying to pick up the corn. This is a beautiful countryside that you see in Nebraska. The beautiful fields, the colors. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Nice flat land. You can see a long distance. You have some rolling hills, of course, but
very
this is
good.
Nebraska at its finest.
Something that you told me recently was that most of the corn that we grow in the United States is field corn. And field corn is basically that corn that is fed to cattle, or it's made from ethanol, or made into ethanol, or other products, etc. And I always thought that really the only corn that was grown was the ones that we eat.
Well, that is sweet corn, and that's another one of the many varieties of corn. Sweet corn is grown for human consumption, and it's got that good taste to it. You know, if you'd bite into a piece of field corn, you'd know the difference right away. It's not very tasty.
Yeah.
And how about popcorn? Was there in Nebraska is popcorn grown?
Yes, there are some large popcorn farms up in central Nebraska, and they grow it just for that particular purpose. You know, they serve popcorn at festivals and at in the movie theaters, and you eat popcorn at home and so forth. So there is a need to grow corn specially made just to be popped.
So I think we have just a few more photos.
Yep, this is it. This is it.
Yeah, we worked from sun up to sundown there, and so we got to see a lot of the good sunsets and the sunrises there, and to enjoy the weather and the scenery at the end of the day. Yeah.
I just couldn't stop taking pictures. This is one of my favorites.
Looks
Of
like a
course.
heart.
It does look like a heart. This is 2 shoots from the choppers. This is 2 of them sitting in the field waiting for the day to start. And I just happened to get the angle, and I just thought, oh, that's a nice picture.
Just to sort of sum up, what's the one thing you would like the audience to understand about your experiences?
Well, I learned about farming and how essential the farms are to our food supply. I was amazed. These men work, and women work day in, day out, sunrise to sunset, and have a lot to do with everything that we eat. And I was just impressed, totally impressed with the work ethic.
And the way they all work together is very impressive too. Not only the people on the crew that's hired to do that work, but also the people from the farms are willing to join in a hand if there's a problem or if they can help in any way. Everybody works
Teamwork.
together so well.
Teamwork. It was great to be a part of this team.
It's just the farmer mentality.
I'm Patrick Dangle. Thank you for viewing this special edition of South Center's Chat. See you soon.